Joining me on the channel today is Kristy Boyce, author of the YA novel Hot British Boyfriend, out now from HarperTeen. It's about a teen who goes on a study abroad opportunity following a humiliating viral rejection and is determined to rebuild her self-confidence by snagging a hot British boyfriend. Welcome, Kristy.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I always like to start at the beginning and explore your journey to becoming a published author. What kind of kid were you?
I was a pretty quiet kid. I am an only child, and I grew up out in the country, so I spent lots of time wandering around forests and on country roads and just kind of in my own mind, making up lots of stories. So I think even before I knew I wanted to be a writer, I probably was already kind of a storyteller in my own mind. So I think it started pretty early for me.
What kind of books did you like reading as a kid?
I love fantasy. In fact, if I'm being honest, I kind of always thought, even as an adult for a while, I thought I would probably go more into the fantasy rather than the contemporary. And I just was in love with fairies and dragons and kind of happy, fun middle grade fantasy growing up. And I still love it to this day. Although I think I found my sweet spot with teen contemporary for my writing, but for my reading, fantasy is always a loved topic.
Any particular favorite authors?
Yeah, so growing up, probably my favorite books ever were the Enchanted Forest Chronicles by Patricia C. Reed. I don't know if people will recognize them as much because they are older, but boy, did I love those books. I actually still have multiple copies of them in hardback and paperback, and they just were the perfect combination of like smart, strong princesses and dragons and swoony princes and all that kind of good stuff. So those are probably my very favorite. I had all the Babysitter Club books, like just, stacks and stacks of them. I think unfortunately at one point we sold them all. I so wish that I had those. That's a regret of mine, but I love Babysitter's Club. And then probably The Giver was another one of my favorites. I like to reread that one quite a bit.
And how did you go from being a reader who loves books to wanting to write your own book?
Well, I so actually my best friend and I started writing little stories together when we were in elementary school, and we would go back and forth with the chapters. I would write one chapter and she would write the next one. So it started off just kind of as like a fun, like kid hobby to have. And then from there, I started working on my own book. And like many writers, I think I wrote the beginning of that book again and again, and I held on to that book so tight for elementary school, high school, even into college. I was still working on that one book. And so I think as time went on, I just realized,
Wow.
I know it's horrible too. It's but like I just was like real into it and just loved that book so much. To be honest, I haven't even read it in so long now, but it's a fun kid random thing. It was I will say it was
But
probably fan
that
fiction.
yeah,
But
but that's pretty like amazing that you stuck with one thing from elementary school through high school. What can you give us like a little tiny pitch or a little like tidbit of what that story was?
of course, yeah. I was actually just thinking about it recently. The reason I said it was kind of like fan fiction, which I only now realize, is because I loved the Enchanted Forest Chronicles so much. And so it's I probably kind of my own interpretations pulling heavily from that. So it's a fantasy world. There's a forest, and it's kind of like like in an oasis. So like around it is all desolate, and then there's these trolls, and they would come and they would try to like invade the forest and take magic out of the forest. And then there was the princess who had to save the boy and also save her land. So it was all very fun, but also very Enchanted Forest Chronicles, and it still has a soft spot in my heart for sure, but it's also it's not well
But
written. We'll say it that way.
yeah, but that you worked on something for so long, it must have some of its DNA must be in your current writing. Like now that you know how to write, like there must be thematic content that's in your current stuff. Do you see any of that in Hot British Boyfriend or anything else that you've written?
Well, I think I always my all of my main characters always I think have some of the similar traits and kind of having their own power, and also, but at the same time, kind of trying to find themselves. I also am a psychologist, and so I feel like that kind of ties in because the research and the work and the teaching that I do is on the self and like our self-esteem and how we come to understand ourselves. So I can see like that even from way before I thought about psychology, just the idea of like this first main character, who this girl is and what she wants and trying to figure that out for herself. And that seems to be what I do in all my books in one way or another. But I mean, I think that a lot of writers do that. We're kind of exploring what it means to be human in some sort of way.
Definitely. Take us through your publishing journey. How did Hot British Boyfriend come to be? And then how did you get your agent? And then how did you get published?
Oh boy. So it's a longer journey, so I'll try to not like take up the entire interview just talking about this. Um,
Everyone's journey is so long, it seems like.
it is. It kind of makes me feel good to hear everybody else's stories, and I will say, even before I get into it, that I'm actually really grateful for the length of it, because that amount of time has both allowed me to understand and just really appreciate it. Like if it happened fast, I don't think I would have appreciated it. And I've also met so many wonderful people along the way who've been so supportive. So I'm very happy that it took the time it took. But all right, so yes, wanted to write forever. I didn't really believe that I could be a professional writer growing up. I grew up in a small town. I didn't know anybody who did anything similar to this. So it just seemed like this crazy dream. So I didn't really, I mean, I wrote, but I didn't take it seriously or think about it professionally until after I finished my PhD in psychology. That was psychology, that my PhD was the only time I didn't write. For 5 years, I didn't do any writing because you can't do anything when you're doing your PhD. It's too much. So, but I missed it. And I really realized, and I made a promise to myself in graduate school. I said, when you finish this, I have to start writing again. Like I missed it too much. And so that was in 2008. And that's when I got kind of involved with trying to write new manuscripts. I did try to do the thing that makes me laugh now. I tried to like write the novel in secret and get it published, and then surprise tell everybody that I was a published author, as if it's so easy. So of course
Yeah.
that did not happen, and I eventually needed to reach out and find a community and find beta readers and everything. So it was a little silly, but so then I did try to query a novel, didn't go anywhere. I took a small break. I had my son in 2012. I came back and I became even a little bit more serious, and I got involved in SCBWI, which made a huge difference for me in terms of learning about craft, learning about the highlights workshops and meeting critique partners and going to conferences. From there, I wrote multiple novels. I queried another novel, got some requests, but nothing really happened. And then I wrote Hot British Boyfriend. There's some other novels in there, but I didn't even do much with them. So then I wrote Hot British Boyfriend. Did the critique thing. I went to the whole novel workshop at Highlights, and that was incredibly helpful. I queried it, but there was a problem. I could tell there was a problem. I would get full requests, and then I would get rejections, and I really hit a wall where I didn't know what to do with it. And I was going to put it aside. And I thought I would apply for Pitch Wars, which is a mentorship
Mhm.
contest that usually is kind of through Twitter. I actually got
Yeah.
into that, which I'm so forever
Yay.
grateful. Yeah. I had applied before and not gotten in, but this time with Hot British Boyfriend, I did get in. And that really made an incredible difference because they helped me with everything, but they helped me with the beginning of the book, which I can talk more about in a little bit. So then after Pitch Wars, they have like an agent round. So I got requests from that. And then it took a little while, but ultimately I ended up signing with my agent because she had requested through Pitch Wars. So I did get some other offers, but I signed with Tara Gonzalez, and she's with Erin Murphy Literary Agency, EMLA. So that was great. And that was the long part of the process. But then
Yeah.
very luckily, the getting the publication deal was not as long. I signed with her early in 2019, and then we went out with the book in, I think it was September, and about 5 weeks later, we had an offer from HarperTeen. So that part was actually really fast and surprising. But
Yeah. So really you've been kind of working on this from like 2012 to 2019 when you got your agent?
yeah, well, I've been working.
Yeah.
So I think my first notes on it were 2014. I had been working on a previous
Mm.
book that I queried, and nothing happened with that. But then even then, sometimes I would write down little notes. Like I think the very first like kernel of a thought about this was 2014, but I think it was probably closer to 2016 that I really dived deeply into it. So I'd say it was about um, like 3 to 4 years of working on it, from the time when I started it really to when I got the offer.
So like a college degree. The book is like your creative writing degree, basically.
Exactly.
tell us tell us about the day that you found out you were going to be published.
That was a glorious day, right? Like that's just like the best day. So the thing that's funny about that, and I don't know, I think this is maybe a little different from other people's experiences. I actually didn't know the book was going to acquisitions.
Mm.
I knew obviously it was out, and we had heard from my editor, who's Catherine Wallace. She had told my agent that she was going to share it with some other people on her team. But it was pretty vague, and I didn't want to get my hopes up. So I was like, well, that's a good sign. Like we both were like, well, that's great that she wants to see what other people think. But the way that she said it, it didn't sound like, going to acquisitions, or we might
Mhm.
want to buy it or whatever. So I had nothing in my mind, and it was only 5 weeks, so I also kind of had prepared myself it would be a long process. So
Yeah.
with that background, I was actually teaching at Ohio State. I was getting out of my honors intro class. I had 12 minutes, because they give you very little time. I had 12 minutes to make it across this very long campus, and I pulled out my phone after my class, because I make sure to never have my phone on, just for like respect for my students, like when I'm in class. So I look at my
Yeah.
phone, and I see that my agent, I see Tara's called, and we had a understanding. She doesn't call unless there's good news. So I'm like, wait, what's going on? What's this good news? So I'm trying to like call her and like get across campus. And then she's like, we have an offer from HarperTeen. And I'm just, I mean, still like my mind was blown. Even now I think about it, it just came out of nowhere, which is honestly perfect, because I didn't have the anticipation or like the fear, like what if it doesn't get through acquisitions? It was just pure joy. And so then of course people always tell me I should have just canceled my next class, but I felt guilty doing that. Like the students were there waiting for me. So I got the call, and I was like crying and calling my husband, and then walked into class and tried to pretend like everything was fine. And then I just
Yeah.
burst into tears in front of everybody in my whole class. Was like, what's going on? Because I don't talk about my writing usually in my teaching life. But I couldn't hold it back.
Yeah.
So they got to hear everything.
Well, I share a similar thing. It wasn't my book deal, but I did have a moment where I cried in front of my students, because I just had gotten really, really great agent feedback. And then I went to I teach costume design. So I was I was in the costume shop, and then all of a sudden I was just thinking about it, and all of a sudden I just burst into tears and I ran away. I'm like, I'm sorry. Then I had
I
to
really
explain
tried to.
myself. It was very embarrassing.
Right? I tried to play it cool. I was like, okay, today we're going to talk about, I don't even know what it was. And then I was like, clearly I had been crying. Like I looked messed up. I was kind of sweating. I came in late. Like I was all messed up. So then I was like, well, I need to give them some explanation of what's going on. And I thought I could just like say it normally. No, they're like the first real people that I told other than my husband. So they had a very, I don't know, first hand knowledge of everything that was happening. They were very sweet.
That's adorable. That's just the best story. Um, what has been a misconception that you might have had about publishing prior to being published that has now changed?
Yeah, so I don't know that I had a lot of misconceptions. Maybe if I kind of go back and think early on, I would have more, but I feel like I've heard so many people talk about their publishing experiences, and I've been to so many SBWI conferences telling me all the details of what happens, that I think overall I had a pretty good understanding of kind of how it was all going to work. Something that's kind of silly that I didn't know that was going to happen, maybe not a misconception, but maybe related to it, is I didn't really, I mean, I thought about working with my editor, but there's all of these other copy editors and there's, the cover designer, and there's just a lot of people behind the scenes. And I didn't really realize how much they're doing, how they're all reading the book, they're all excited about the book. Like they sent me, I don't even remember off the top of my head what the name of it is, but maybe but it's like a document that lists every single location in my book, every single character, like all these details that somebody had to go through and do. And I was like, I didn't know this was a thing. And it was very cool to receive that. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that's really answering the question, but
Yeah, no, I'm probably getting that at like the end of the month because my book just went into copy edit. So I think that's like a copy editing stage. And I've heard like they give you like a book report on your on your book, like with the timeline and everything. So yeah, that'll be interesting.
I wasn't expecting it. And so it was very fun to get to see that. I was like, oh, you guys know more about my book than I do now. Like I forgot about this thing. So
Pitch your book. Tell us all about it in your own words.
okay. Well, you already did a good job of explaining the basics of it. I mean, very, quickly, it's about a girl who travels to England to find true friendship, to find love, and to find herself. So to find self-acceptance. But, with a little bit more, yes, she has had this viral rejection. She's going to England hoping that a hot British boyfriend is going to solve all of her troubles. She's excited to travel. She's not excited to do any schoolwork there. And then she does find a boy, a Willoughby, but then realizes that maybe he's not quite as perfect as she first thought, and that she's going to have to maybe lie a little bit to kind of keep him around. So she gets herself into a little bit of trouble as that goes on.
And what's your favorite step? Is it drafting or revising?
Hmm. So my usual joke is that I say it's whatever I'm not doing right now, because whatever I'm doing right now feels really hard, and I always want to get to the next step. Um, I do. I actually like drafting. I do a kind of a weird thing with my first drafts, which is that I don't type them. I actually go for walks and I dictate them into my phone. So I find it kind of freeing to not have to see the words, and to just like speak and just have conversations. And it sounds really weird because you have to say like, um, she said, period. Like you have to put the punctuation in and everything as you're saying it. But I've gotten kind of used to that. I know it's weird, but it's just something that there's something kind of freeing and fun, and also knowing that like it's okay if it's kind of bad because we're just, or maybe really bad because we're
Yeah.
just trying to get the groundwork. I'm somebody who does the whole book all the way through, and then I start revising. I don't revise as I draft. So that part, it feels like there's a little less pressure in some ways. But then of course revising has its own fun as well. But I guess if I had to choose, I'd probably say drafting.
What's been the best revision tip that you've gotten along the way?
Oh boy. Well, I think, I don't know if it's like a tip, but I mean, I think certainly the reason why I like to finish my drafts completely and then go back is oftentimes I have a really hard time figuring out where to start the book. That was the issue with Hot British Boyfriend. Oftentimes I want to start when there's too much action and you kind of need the background or whatever. So I think maybe a good revision tip has just been to kind of let go of getting it all perfect at one time and get through it, and you'll kind of learn more as you do those cycles of revision. um yeah.
Are you a perfectionist or a chaos artist?
um can I be both? I don't know. I at the beginning I think it's very chaos. It's all, the drafting is crazy. I'm putting asterisks in places. I'm not, finishing all the sentences or the descriptions. So I can sometimes see that there's something in those drafts, but probably if somebody else looked at it, they would be like, this is just a hot mess. But then I can get to be a perfectionist once I start the revision process, because then I want to, like, sometimes I'll just read the dialogue again and again, and like, tweak a comma, those kinds of things. So I feel like I'm a little bit of both depending on where I'm at in the process.
Do you have a huge ego or are you humble and demure?
I do not have a huge ego. No, maybe I should have more of one. I am humble to a fault. I'm still one of those people who takes, it's a little hard for me to take a compliment. I'm still working on, everybody congratulating me and me being able to say thank you, and I'm excited. But I figure, I don't know. I guess I'd rather be humble.
And are you a plotter or a pantser?
I am a plotter ish. So like I know some people who are really plotters where they have everything outlined, and I don't do big full outlines. I usually will have a general synopsis, not even that because that sounds too fancy, but I'll have a general sense of like this is the plot, this is the basic ending, and I'll have some like steps, like I know I need to get to this point and then I need to get to this point. But what comes in between or how exactly I get there, that's where the pantsing part comes in. And oftentimes honestly, like I said, I'll be walking around my neighborhood dictating, and there's something kind of freeing about that, being able to move as I'm writing, and sometimes ideas will come to me that I hadn't thought of, but I like them better, and so I will kind of just go with it, but it's still in service of whatever that next goal is or that next plot point that I'm trying to get to.
Are you a morning writer or an evening writer?
I am definitely an evening writer. I am not a morning person. Struggle with that, and I do have a son. He's 8 now, and so between particularly pandemic, you know, between his virtual school, I'm teaching full time. I have almost no time in the day, so it's at night, maybe 8:30 on, that I try to do my writing, and I'll be up kind of late sometimes. Like it's not unusual for me to be up until midnight writing, but that's when my brain seems to do, I'm a little better then. So
Do you start with like character first or plot first?
I am totally starting with the plot first. I'm jealous. I will hear stories of people who come up with a character and they kind of have to like they know everything about the character, but they have to like find a plot that works for that character. And that's the exact opposite of how my brain works. I come up with the scenario first. I have a general idea. I know there's a girl who's gonna go study abroad, and then I'm like, well, who would this girl be like after the fact? I have to kind of figure out her personality. So it sometimes it's a bit of a struggle to be honest, but I guess it works.
Was there ever a point where you feared you would never be published?
Oh yes, there was many times. I always wanted it, but I mean, it was a long process. I have very distinctive memories of with one previous novel. I'd had one last full. My full was out with one agent, and I was really hoping that was going to happen, and then it came back as a rejection, and it really was a gut punch. And I was just, I knew I had to give up on that novel at that point, and the idea of starting all over again with Hot British Boyfriend was hard. I also distinctly remember getting those rejections with Hot British Boyfriend because initially I had seemingly good feedback from agents and I was getting a lot of full requests, and then they were all coming back somewhat quickly with rejections. And I have one day in particular I can remember, just out of coincidence, I'm sure, I got like maybe 4 or 5 rejections from agents, just like boom 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 in a row. Maybe they were trying to clear out their inboxes before Easter or something. And I remember kind of my husband coming home and I was like curled in the fetal position on my couch. So yeah, there is definitely some times when I was like, is this gonna happen? Like I was not convinced. But I also knew that I wanted it, and that I was going to write no matter what. So it was sad, but I knew I wasn't going to give up on it.
Would you ever like to be famous?
No, I mean, no. I guess it depends on what famous means. I think it would be nice if there was even a small subset of readers who knew my name or knew my books, but I wouldn't want to be like truly famous. Like even the way I will see some YA writers who become so famous, you know, if they have their books made into movies, there's just so much judgment online, and there's, you know, they follow you and there's so many comments, and I don't think I could do well with that. So I think I'm okay with just not very much notoriety.
If you could have any one non-supernatural talent or ability, what would it be?
All right, so I had thought about this one, and I'm going to go back to my night versus day or morning writing. I think it would be really nice if I actually was a morning person. It's not going to happen, but I look at these other writers and some of my friends who just naturally can get up at like 5 a.m. and
Yeah.
their brain is working for them, and they can sit down, they can write first thing in the morning, and then the whole rest of the day, like they already know they got their writing done. So I just feel it sounds so like relaxing and nice to get to do that. And I'm the opposite. I have to get through the whole rest of the day and then I can write at night. So I think I would
Yeah.
like to flip those if it was possible.
Yeah, I envy those people. I actually got up well, I set my alarm for 5 a.m. this morning because I had some interviews set early, and I did not wake up. I definitely hit the snooze. And then around 5:30, I eventually got up and started to get ready. But it was nice, like at 7, where I'm like, oh, I'm awake. and I have the whole day ahead of me. That's kind of nice. I don't know if I will ever have the willpower to actually get up at 5:30 in the morning again, unless it's something really
I can't
important.
I can't do it. And people are like, "Well, just set your alarm." And I'm just like, "But I'm too even if I did make myself get up, my brain is not functioning in a way where I could write anything coherent. I could maybe do other stuff, but writing wise, it's a no-go for me. So I'm going to be a night owl, I think."
What are you working on now?
So I'm drafting a new novel, so it's going to be another YA contemporary. And then so that's kind of fun. Although I will say that I usually draft in the summer, and this is my first time trying to draft in February, and the weather, I'm in Ohio and the weather here is not conducive for me taking long walks and dictating, so we're going to see how that goes. But I'm trying to draft a new YA romance, and then I have another one that's out on sub, so fingers crossed for good news.
Yay! So everyone check out Hot British Boyfriend, and I've put links to Kristy's social media down below. So definitely check that out. Thank you so much for being on the channel, Kristy.
Thank you so much for having me. It was so fun.